What is up, Sam Ashers, and welcome to Sam Ash Live. I'm Dave Stutz, and tonight we have an incredible stream planned for you. Of course, we'll be discussing the all-new Cubase 11 with my special guest. I'm a Cubase user myself. I recently celebrated the release of my new track, Shaolin, available now anywhere you get your music. It's an easy listening, soundtrack-inspired piece that encapsulates the vibe of East meets West, and more importantly, it was 100% recorded, mixed, and mastered all inside of Cubase. So please take the time and check it out for yourself. That's Dave Stutz, Shaolin, to see a perfect example of what Cubase can do. Also want to let you know that our friends at Steinberg have blessed us with the opportunity to offer you a chance to win your very own copy of Cubase 11. That is a tremendous value. For details on the Cubase 11 giveaway, check out the description box below. If any of you are just too excited, you can, of course, head over to samash.com, your premier destination for software, and grab your copy of Cubase 11 right now. Finally, I'd like to mention that at Sam Ash, we're currently offering 0% interest for 48 months. That's 4 years, 0% interest on select brands, including, but not limited to, Martin, Taylor, Casio, and more. We're also offering 0% interest for 36 months on select brands like Yamaha, Gibson, Yamaha, Chord, Yamaha, Blackstar, Yamaha, and more. So be sure to take advantage of these incredible financing offers. You can find out more at samash.com. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest today. He's the master and commander of all things Cubase. He's here to take us through all the new and exciting additions to Cubase 11 and answer any questions you may have. So please feel free to submit them anytime. Live stream audience, please welcome Greg Ondo. Greg,
hi.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thanks for having us.
I am awesome. Thank you for being here, man. I'm so excited to talk about Cubase 11. Today's the first day I booted it. It looks similar, but it's got a new sheen to it. There's something just so exciting. But I'll let you get into it, man. So what is our first topic today for Cubase 11?
So one of the things we want to do is we'll take a look at some of the MIDI editing enhancements. So a lot of
Fantastic.
our composers, they, during we're doing some like previews for composers. And one theme that we heard often from people was, I spend more time in a key editor than I see my children in a day. So we wanted to kind of simplify and make some of these processes a little more elegant and solve some solutions and solve some problems that they may run into. So one of the things, especially people starting, when we double click on a note, we could open up a note expression editor. And this is kind of like almost a precursor of MIDI 2.0, where we could have independent controllers on a particular note, but some people want to do something really simple, just being able to double click and to delete a note. So we added this little option that we could turn on and off and toggle the behavior. So if I double click, we can now just simply delete the note. I could undo that, but with just one simple tool, I could draw a note in. I could choose to split a note, holding down my Alt or Option key. I could resize notes, and I could double click on notes without having to switch a single tool. So a lot of people that just kind of draw in a key editor, and that's how they sequence without having a keyboard. You could do that much easier now. Working with MIDI CCs, we wanted to kind of bring some of the automation capabilities that we had. So we could just come over here and say, okay, I wanted to go to, let's say, modulation. We could choose whether we wanted to enter them in as steps, and that's how previous behavior was, but also in ramps. So I could now just draw in 2 different points, and that will automatically put in just a really beautiful ramp. So I don't have to kind of, enter multiple values. Now, once we have these ramps, as we hover over it in the center, we're able just to do different Bezier curves. So at this point, we could just have a lot of flexibility, just handling curves very easily. So that's
so clean.
Yeah, and that's something we introduced in automation, and some people wanted to do this, would go into automation and kind of transfer data back and forth, but we just thought it was the right thing to do, just to put it directly in the MIDI editor itself.
Amazing.
Now, a lot of times, and you probably notice as, doing composition stuff, we could look at two different tracks in Cubase. And one of the things that's, if we had like, a modulation that was kind of controlling the dynamics and how many string instruments were being kind of introduced.
Sure.
And I wanted to see it on my high part. And then we could switch to, just by clicking on the secondary part, we could see kind of different modulation data between these two parts.
Wow.
And if I wanted to copy those, what I could do is right click and I'll just say, okay, we're going to select all the automation events on that lane. So, because you may have one string part, you may go, I want violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, bass to all have that same behavior. So at this point, I'm going to copy. And then I click on my other part, and then I'll just right click and paste at origin. And now all that CC data is going to be consistent between the two sources. So, and stuff like that just kind of simplifies the process instead of having to delete and then, copy and paste, so just making it much faster.
That's so helpful.
Pitch bend information is always kind of problematic for a lot of programs. So because there's 16,384 values for pitch bend.
Right.
And when you're doing editing, it's like, okay, that's great. I could be very expressive, but it also depends on what the range of your instrument is set to. So there's 16,384 for one semitone or two semitones or 12 semitones, depending on what the instrument is set to. So at this point, I could just say, I'm going to just show a semitone grid, and I could put these values in here just to have, to match the instrument. And now I'll just kind of draw in, and we could just, have our pitch bend data entered in. But one of the problems that people run into a lot, is, let's say I wanted to do a pitch bend and return down. And sometimes you may return just a little bit flat or sharp from the initial value, and that could be problematic. So, we figured a lot of times people, this was kind of a feature request that Zed had passed on to us. And he's like, when I'm doing pitch bend, I would love to be able to just click and have the pitch bend snap directly to the semitone grid. And that's
absolutely
what this option does. So you can have that same type of behavior, but have it snap musically, and again, have access to your curves when needed right there.
That's incredible. That is super useful. I can't tell you how many times I'll troubleshoot a track and it's just something with that automation that I didn't realize was activated, and that is super seamless. Yeah, I'm going to use that a lot in 11.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of the last things you do is like, why is the track not sounding right?
Right.
It's like, oh, the pitch bend is off by, 1 cent out of 16,384.
Exactly.
So that could be hard to see. So we wanted to kind of just make that process a bit easier.
Amazing.
So, we also had we have a lot of people that, have a great understanding of music theory, and sometimes people are new to it. And it could be, tough. It's like learning a new language, like scales and chords and harmony.
100%.
So we wanted to kind of simplify this process, and we have something called a scale assistant. So we could utilize the chord track, if we have that in the project. But, if we don't have a chord track, Cubase could actually look at the part and give us chord suggestions, kind of based on looking at the actual parts. So when we're looking at this, we could actually say, okay, I wanted to, say we're in G major here. But I could also say, I want to be a little more exotic. And so I say, let maybe a G major pentatonic or Balinese or Hungarian scale. But what's really interesting, we had a composer, Trevor Morris, who, has done all sorts of wonderful TV shows like The Vikings.
Oh, yeah.
Great composer, big Cubase fan. And he's like, I always, want to work with exotic scales. So he's like, is there a Bartok half diminished? And we're like, no, but you could actually now come here and create your own custom scale to work with. So you can have a Bartok half diminished. Now,
so
as I work with this, one of the great things is, as I do just editing, I could move notes kind of chromatically up, but we could also choose to just have this snap to being directly only within the scale that's been defined. So it won't go out of the key. And if it is kind of out of key, one of the great things is, you could look at a part and let's say you just flub some notes. Maybe keyboard isn't your primary instrument. You could just say Quantize Pitches, and that will take all the pitches in the part and make it fall within key.
Greg, that's insane because, I'm sure there's plenty of people that like to add lots of accidentals and key changes and stuff like that. But I'm sure for 90% of the people that are getting into this, usually a lot of the writing starts in a key. And I can't tell you how many times I've been dragging just trying to get to that note. So that saves so much time. I love that feature. I'm going to have that on all the time.
Now, let's say keyboard isn't your primary instrument. Like my primary instrument is bass. So nice. I should just practice, but let's say I'm busy. So we have this snap live input. So I'm going to just kind of play, let's say, just a little bit of a harp voice here. So, we could just kind of come right here. And, if we wanted to just put in, like a different type of scale, what I could do is put this into like a step entry mode, and I could just kind of rub my fingers across my keyboard and you'll be able to just kind of enter in runs that automatically, fit within the key. So, different elements like that, just like, okay, I want to go, and have that, and not have one bad note and not have to slow it down to like, 20 beats a minute to play it in physically.
So you didn't discern or discriminate the notes on your keyboard at all. You just dragged your finger.
Yeah, I just kind of swiped. So even if I open up just a quick, I'll delete these notes here and I'll open up just like my software keyboard. So I activate this and I'll say, okay, I want 16th note triplets, and let me just shut this down, move just a position of this just so we can see it on the screen. And I can just go, okay. And that will just enter in all the notes directly there and be in key.
That's awesome.
So
now you did that without hitting the record button?
Yep. I just put it into step entry.
There it is. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I just wanted you to show that again. Awesome.
Yeah.
Step entry.
So, and sometimes when we see this, as people, there's a lot of people that, compose just writing in a MIDI key editor with their mouse. And that's just how they create music. And it's a viable work form. And when you watch people do this, they could be incredibly fast, and it could be kind of an untraditional approach. But, there is a laptop producer, the laptop composer, musician.
I'm pretty sure that's how Deadmau5 says he does it. He said, if I could play it in, I would, but I can't. So I draw it.
Yeah. And we're not going to say, oh, you should really practice more. He's done okay for himself.
Absolutely.
So we could actually have different filter options that we could say, I don't want to see all the notes. I only want to see the notes that are in the scale. And I only want to see notes that actually have events on them. So this way, if I have, like a whole range of notes that are really low and really high, but nothing in the middle, I don't have to constantly scroll up and down. We could choose to kind of filter the views or kind of fold the views. So if I don't want to see every single note, I could just say, okay, I just want to see notes that have events or notes that will only fit within the scale. So just kind of, or if you wanted to see all the notes to work with accidentals, it's all right there for you.
Wow. That's incredible.
The one thing that our composers really loved is they love working in just, this full screen view all the time. And they may need to see different parts from the main project window here. So sometimes people would work in a lower zone editor, but, if you have a big orchestration, the full screen is where those people live. So we've included the capability of having global tracks. So I can say, I want my video in the key editor. I want it to see the chord track, and let's double click and edit the chord track like I was on the main project window. So the same functions. I wanted to see my ruler track, so I could see SMPTE timecode if I was scoring to film, tempo. So that would be really cool if we could just speed up right here and slow down. and I can make my tempo changes. Let's look at my time signature. So I can see, oh, we're in 6/8 time. Whether I have transpose or an arranger track, but also markers. And so at this point, we could just say, okay, we could see our markers, and we see this little kind of an interesting thing where the marker lines could also go vertically on the main project window or throughout the editor. So we get this kind of little vertical line indicating right where the marker is without having to always reference up to the top. And I even put a marker track in that just for lyrics. So if you're working and someone says, oh, go to the word ground, you're like, oh, what measure is that?
Right.
Where I sing ground. Like, okay. And then you
Right.
could actually just see right here the lyrics if you have those entered in the marker track as well. So, and if you go, okay, I don't want to see any of these, one mouse click, they're all gone. And then one mouse click, all of your global tracks can be visible within the editor.
So helpful, so
yeah.
useful. Well, that is amazing. So, Greg, the interesting thing to me about global tracks is I come from a music school background. It was very formal to be a composer. There wasn't a lot of Cubasing going on. It was mostly your nose buried in Finale, or I forget what the other one was, Sibelius. So I was used to, as a composer, to getting in a piece of sheet music and handwriting the articulation. This is forte, this is mezzo forte, and that's how it works. So I think for a lot of us transitioning over to recording software, Cubase is capable of all that same stuff. You just have to approach it differently. And once I discovered the global tracks and literally just increasing the tempo a little bit, dropping it back down, everything starts to sound so musical and so exciting. So that would probably be my first tip for anyone like me, composers trying to get into the world of mixing and mastering and stuff, is all of the same rules apply. Melody, rhythm, harmony, dynamics, articulation. Cubase can do all that. And you just showed how easy the global track is.
Yeah, and I think it's like, there's so many great things that could happen, just like bumping up the chorus 2 beats per minute and then going down 2 beats per minute in the verse, just to kind of get that little bit of energy. Just quick tempo changes can make a huge difference in the feel of the track.
For sure. And I just want to remind our viewers, we're talking with Greg Ondo of Steinberg, the ace of Cubase, discussing the brand new and very powerful Cubase 11 digital audio workstation, aka recording software. We have a contest running for our viewers to win their very own copy of Cubase 11. One lucky viewer will get chosen at the end of the stream. Details are in the description box below. Also want to remind everyone that we are streaming on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. For any reason, should you be having technical issues on one platform, you have 3 others to go to. That's YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. Also want to remind everybody that this is an invaluable opportunity. Greg is here. Ask him anything, everything. He's happy to answer. We're happy to answer. And also, should you find the time, you can also follow Steinberg and Sam Ash on Instagram and Twitter. And we are currently running promotions, 0% interest for 48 months. You can go to samash.com or call 1-800-4SAM-ASH. All right, Greg, I'm very excited to hear what's next. Please take it away.
Yeah, so you mentioned kind of about more traditional, approach to composition, like from the score view. And so we'll just kind of jump there because there's some really great enhancements with the score editor. So I could just take like a piano part here and, we could do full score printing, arranging, but there's some really clever things that have been added in this particular version. So, we also have kind of our, a dedicated notation package called Dorico. And, one of the great things is we're starting to see some of the technology between Cubase and Dorico, kind of merge. And one of the first areas where this had merged was actually going to be, Cubase now has support for Smoofle Font, which kind of sounds weird, but it's a standard music, font layout. And what this means now is we could just come over here and say, okay, I wanted to have like the fonts that we utilize in Dorico. And we could change the fonts directly here in Cubase so that any of the fonts that, you could have the same exact look and appearance inside of Cubase that you do for the font wise that you do in Dorico. which is
Wow.
a really, really nice thing. So that, as you're spending a lot of time in your project, and maybe like, if you're like, and we have a great video like Alan Silvestri, the wonderful composer, just such a wonderful person, and how
Absolutely.
he starts in Cubase and will print out all the parts from Dorico and use both of the programs. And when we do this, we also have added, sometimes when you get into notation programs, you have to do a lot of menu diving. And ironically, a lot of notation programs that have been used, over the years are pretty amusical in a lot of ways. So if I wanted to make changes, one of the things that we could do is actually just, have a new inspector tab zone on the right-hand side. So if I click on a particular element in the score, such as my bar line, I could see the bar lines here. If I click on the clefs, I could just see all of my clefs pop up. So it's going to be context sensitive for everything that we select here. If I wanted to select my dynamics, we could do that, and we could even do like dynamic mapping. So let's say if I wanted to put in a dynamic marking here, so let's say I just put in like for piano dynamics, we could actually, just double click on it and see like, I want this to change the velocity by X amount. So you have those types of options as well. And as we want to, just work with different functions, if I select the score, we're going to be able to, just see, some of our different components that would be kind of in our context sensitive menu. Once I'm here, we also have kind of this thing called an overlay editor. So anything that I hover over, I could now adjust, a lot of times when people are working in the score editor, they may go, oh, this note is too loud. This note is too long or too short. We could hover over this and I could adjust like the length of notes. I could adjust the velocity. So I'm just going to hover, say, this note was too loud or too soft. I'm going to just come right here and adjust the velocity. I want to adjust the length of the actual MIDI note, but not how it reflects necessarily in the score. So let's say I want that note to be shorter, or I want to adjust to keep that note playing an eighth note for the sample or the instrument, but I want the note to actually last through the end of the bar. So you could have controls for your display length of notes, for the actual length of notes, and your velocity, that you're able to just kind of come right over here and be able to adjust graphically your music when it's in the score editor. So you don't constantly toggle back and forth between the score editor and the, graphic piano roll editor. So, even if you do start off from a very traditional, music pedagogy background, you could go in and just kind of tweak it and still kind of get those performance elements incorporated within the score editor in Cubase.
So Greg, that only irritates me a little bit because you're making it too easy. It was really hard 10 years ago when I was in Finale, having to click a menu, then a sub menu, then right click, down. Oh no, the mouse missed it. I got to go back up and do it again. Well, that's incredible.
If you get paid by the hour, that could be okay. But
I paid them to be there.
Yeah.
So the first thing I thought of when you were showing that is some people might wonder, why would you want a note to reflect something different in the score than maybe what you're actually hearing in Cubase? And for me, I think that all comes down to, there's a difference between your MIDI mockup, the Cubase mockup, and then what you're actually handing to a player. Sometimes a player needs to see a note a certain way, but your software, to just leave it to sound a certain way. So for me, that would be the great benefit of that. I don't know if you have another reason.
Yeah. And, you see a lot of scores done on computers and it's like, yeah, you really intended a lot of 30-second note rests here.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, no one would ever hand that to a player, and the player would just like, oh, it's another computer score. It's not really how a musician wants to see it.
Yeah.
So Cubase, you could have, I always say a lot of times with notation parts, you can say, oh, I could have it look good and sound bad, or I could have it look bad and sound good. But in Cubase, we want it to look good and sound good.
Right. That was the first time I learned how to be a music snob. I was an adjunct drumline professor for a high school, And one of the kids came up and said, "Hey, I wrote a new part for the drum line." I looked at the notation. I'm like, how do you expect anyone to count all these? This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. So you talked about Dorico. I just want to touch on that just a little bit. One of the things that I think could have been stressed a little more in music school was recording, mixing, and mastering. That's not really something that had a lot of weight. Now, that was a while ago. I don't know if schools do it more now, but the program that we worked in, like I said, was Finale. I'm almost of the ilk that if you're going into music school, it might be more beneficial to grab Dorico and grab Cubase. I mean, because then you can write in Dorico, but then you have all these amazing and powerful instruments in Cubase. So you can really start to make incredible MIDI mock-ups right out the gate as a freshman in college. I mean, do you agree? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it totally makes sense. I mean, I think, and I think between those two programs for any of your production needs, so like anything that you want to do in Cubase, whether it's, and we've done these series of videos for Sam Ash, where you did like, if you're doing hip hop and EDM, you're doing bands, if you're a composer, and it's
right.
You never want to say no when someone's offering you an opportunity to do work for them with music. So if you have the one tool, or the tools that allow you to do more work, that's a great thing. And especially as a student, because we have great educational discounts that you can get at Sam Ash for
sure.
Steinberg stuff. And and when I was in college, everyone's like, cool, I could use the studio at school. And I'm like, and no one was buying gear except me. I'm like, you're going to graduate and they're not going to let you in the studio. So you should start building up your equipment and building up kind of your workflows with software so that, that you're working while you're in school. And then, when school is over, that you're just, that far ahead of everyone else.
Absolutely. So there you go. Any students in music school out there, either just starting or maybe you're a freshman or sophomore, definitely get on the Cubase train, on the Dorico train. Like Greg said, look into really nice plugins to help you mix and master your audio so that you can be one step ahead of the game once you graduate. Once again, a brief reminder, we're talking with Greg Ondo of Steinberg, the ultimate authority of the Cubase majority, discussing the brand new, simple to use, yet so powerful Cubase 11 digital audio workstation. Reminder, we do have a contest running for our viewers to possibly win their very own copy of Cubase 11, courtesy of Steinberg. We're very appreciative of that. That is a tremendous value. Details are in the description box below. We're streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. You can follow us at some amazing places like Instagram and Twitter. We're also currently doing 0% interest for 48 months on select brands. So be sure to check out samash.com, 1-800-4SAMASH. Or should it be feasible and safe to do so in certain districts, head over to Sam Ash if you can. Just wear your mask. All right, Greg, I'm super excited. What are we going to talk about next?
Let's take a look at the sampler track, because this is kind of a really creative tool. And one of the things that we want to be able to do is to, come up with new and fresh sounds very quickly. So, we've done a lot of work kind of with sampler track, and what this allows you to do is kind of merges a lot of MIDI and audio, because we could just add a sampler track like so. And then if I have an audio file or just a MIDI note here, MIDI information that's going to a virtual instrument, I could drag it right down and it's going to just render. And I could just play instantly. So any audio file that you have. Some of the new things that we could do in the sampler track is, sometimes people will do it and they're like, oh, I wish I could normalize the sound to make it a little louder. You can normalize now. Right inside of the sampler track, we could set different, I wanted to start and end here to play back. But one of the, really important things was the ability to come over here. Let's say I have a drum loop. We've introduced new different playback engines. So if you're doing like really extreme kind of stretching, or if you want it to be like a vintage Akai sampler, like an S950 type vibe, when it was 12-bit, you're so happy to have that. You have these different kind of playback algorithms. So when I just drop a drum loop in, and now I could play that drum loop, and if I play it up like an octave, You know,
Oh, wow.
it'll play back at twice the speed. But if I
Interesting.
want it to actually play back at the same speed, I could enable audio warp. And then whatever key I hit to trigger it will just automatically just kind of play it back.
Look at that.
And we had a lot of people that wanted to be able to kind of slice your sample. So when I click on the slice tab, it's now each of the samples has automatically been just sliced and mapped to our different keys.
That is so cool.
So if I just wanted to come here and, you know, find
that is so cool.
My own beat. But if we see this little MIDI icon, if I drag that out to the sampler track, I can now, I'll just view this. And let's say I just wanted to take this drum loop and I wanted the drum loop to kind of just be kind of rearranged. So I'm just going to use the arrow keys here in Cubase and scientifically, of course. And now I could just take that same drum loop with the same sounds and let's listen to it. And that way you could kind of do, you know, construction and deconstructing of loops as well. So
just for people out there who are like me, I just want to reiterate that you're using an audio file to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the sampler just sliced it up, generated the MIDI information with the perfect timing, and we just drop it right in.
This isn't a VST that you're pressing the keys to trigger the sound. You're splicing up a drum loop and then just putting it anywhere you want at your whim, creating a whole different beat. That's insane.
Yeah. And again, just
I love it.
Fast and musical. Now there's other kind of, you know, people often think of like when you're doing slicing, that's just for drums, but you could do a lot more because you could actually now at this point,
no time to hesitate, it's all been
so I have a vocal loaded here.
You wanna have it, you can
okay.
get enough.
So what I'm going to do is actually just, and we could have an A and a B setting. So if you do like all sorts of edits and you're like, oh, I totally screwed it up, but maybe it's genius or maybe it's not. You could just kind of toggle back and forth. So now I could, you could put these slices in by transient, by grid, or manually. So I could just come over here.
You wanna hesitate.
And I could do kind of different vocal chops.
You wanna hesitate. You wanna hesitate. Can't enough.
So I could just say, okay, let's, you know, someone just came in and improvised.
You wanna hesitate enough, baby.
And just come up with new ideas and be able to kind of just play it from your MIDI keyboard in real time. Just
I can't believe what you just did. It just seems so easy. Like it seems like that used to be harder. That's amazing.
Yeah. Until last week, it was much harder.
Right. Amazing. Yeah. I feel like this just unlocks so many new songwriting opportunities. Anyway, I'm just excited. Go ahead, Greg.
All right. Now we had a lot of people that want to do like different types of glides. So if I come here.
Sure.
And we could set up, you know, and we hear this in pop music all the time now. So we could set it up into a finger mode. I'm going to enable kind of monophonic mode. So when I'm in finger mode and I play two notes that are separated, and we could kind of look at the keys here towards the bottom, it won't glide.
Right.
But if I hold down the first note and then hit the second note.
Oh, wow. That's a smooth glide.
And as I hit the glide, you may notice that when I hit the second note that the glide plays back from the start of the sample.
Right.
And that's pretty typical. But if I wanted to do something a little more musical, we could actually, when I hit the second note, when I enabled this mode, what we could do is the sample will continue to play through the sample and just change the pitch in real time. So I could just do more kind of creative.
That's really cool.
Now, where it gets really interesting, I had my friend Daryl Pearson, who's a great producer, and I think he was on a Justin Timberlake session, and he actually took some time out for me. And I was like, I gave him a weird request. I was like, can you just sing something for me that's just one single note? And he's
Oh,
like,
wow.
why would I do that?
Yeah.
I'm like, so he just sang me this.
I'm singing this phrase for Greg so that he can get what he needs accomplished with this program.
All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the mode. I'm just going to hold the first note down and just play the MIDI keyboard, and I could write a new melody.
I am singing this phrase for Greg so that he can get what he needs accomplished with this program. This is a recording.
That is insane.
So any audio, guitar solo, drum parts, just kind of, you could just play it with different pitches on keys and come up with really fresh, interesting ideas.
Wow. So we have a question. Can you do that with written MIDI instead of playing it live?
To do the sample with MIDI?
Right. Like, could you write it ahead of time instead of doing it live?
Sure. Yeah. So you could do that. Like this part here that I dragged over was just a single MIDI note. But that could be an entire musical phrase that's dragged over, and replay it. And of course, just kind of play anything in MIDI and, be able to kind of, have it work exactly how you want. So
this sampler seems like it should be its own program that you have to pay for.
And that's
it
one
kills
of the things,
me.
That's one of the things that, we see with Cubase, and, sometimes, some people, other companies get mad at us. They're like, why do you just keep including everything?
Right.
And as we, because we want to offer just a really comprehensive suite of tools that come with Cubase. And, we've all been through, and we're going to go through it again, the new operating system update, and we'll call it versionitis, where it's like, like Cubase can run on Big Sur, but, most of your plugins can't.
Right.
So every time you run into one of those scenarios where it's like, like there's still a lot of tools that don't work on Catalina, on Mac OS Catalina.
Yeah.
But Cubase does, and maybe your audio interface isn't updated, but these plugins aren't, and we're already on to the next operating system. So, having it all kind of within one environment can really, just speed up workflow pretty significantly.
That's such a good point. Yeah, definitely be careful upgrading your software or your operating systems if you don't know that already. I've made that mistake before where I upgraded and then I launched Cubase and nothing worked, and I had it anyway.
Yeah, your Cubase plugins worked, but
they did, but all the third-party stuff crashed.
Yeah.
All right, continue, sir.
So let's say we have like our little synthesizer, our basic synth sound that I dragged in earlier.
Right.
And I wanted to just kind of change some of the different sounds. So we could have multiple filter types, multiple filter shapes that we could work with. But let's say I just wanted to put just a quick filter to change kind of the sound. And as we do this, I could just say, okay.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things is we could have a cutoff key follow. So as I play lower pitch notes, we could have the filter kind of open up. As we play higher pitch notes, the filter opens up more.
Wow, look at that.
So just kind of very easy, just to kind of. But one of the things that people wanted was a way to kind of have the sounds kind of modulate and change themselves. And we could do this through, because we've added 2 different Lfos. And if you're not kind of hip to what Lfos are, we could think of it as like low frequency oscillation. So, and sometimes with synthesizers, we hear Lfos, and that's what generates the tones. But what this is going to do is I could just come over here and adjust the LFO. And one of the cool things, once we have this open, you can see that as I adjust like my filter here, we can see the waveform updating as well. So what I want to do is have this filter kind of turn off and on, and I could change the rate at which it does that. I could change kind of the phase if I wanted to come here and change the shape. So say I want it to be slower, but a different shape. So And we could have these be kind of based on to synchronize to different tempos as well. So if you wanted to always be like a quarter note or half note. And now I could take this particular sound and I'll just say, okay, I wanted to adjust my panning LFO. So I could just come over here and have that just change. So you take a very simple sound and just kind of add that motion. It's going to always be kind of adding interest in your particular project. I could come here, save this as a track preset with all of the effects, EQs, so I could use it in any other project. But one of the coolest things is a lot of times people will, spend a lot of time kind of shaping the sound. And let's say, I really like that, but maybe I just didn't like, one certain aspect of it. I could click on this lock button, drag any audio file from my media bay over. All those settings will be preserved. And I could just have kind of all the settings just with a new sample.
Wow, that's cool.
And once we're done with this, I can just say, oh, let's just take this directly, and I could transfer this to Groove Agent, Groove Agent SE, Hallian, Pad Shop, or Backbone. So if we wanted to kind of take it to the next level in designing our own sounds,
look at
that option right there.
That's pretty cool.
So see if there's any other questions, and we can move on to next topic.
I have taken a look. I don't see any questions right away, but if we're transitioning topics, then I, of course, want the chance to remind everybody that we're talking with Greg Ondo of Steinberg, the Cubase connoisseur, to our live stream viewer, discussing brand new and highly acclaimed Cubase 11. That's 11, not 10.2, not 10.5. We've rounded it over. We've reached a whole number again. We're on to Cubase 11. As a reminder to those just tuning in, we have a contest running for our viewers to win their very own copy of Cubase 11. One lucky winner shall win. Don't miss out on your chance to write better sounding and more professionally produced music, all at the small cost of checking out the details in the description box below. And also just a reminder, everybody, we are streaming on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Greg is here for us. This is your time. If you have any questions, I know I have them. I'm asking them, but I want you to get your chance too. Please feel free to comment with your questions. Also, Sam Ash is currently doing 48 months, 0% interest on so many brands. Be sure to check that out at samash.com. You can also follow Steinberg and Sam Ash on Instagram and Twitter. Greg, it's all yours, sir.
All right.
What is next?
All right. So we've also updated some of our plugins and some of our favorite plugins, and some new additions as well. So, we talked about, the suite of plugins that you get with Cubase is really second to none. But sometimes we're always looking to tweak them, make them better, or come up with something new. So one of the ones that was updated was the Imager plugin. So it's kind of an old concept. You make your mix sound wider. And, it sounds great at first. And then sometimes when you're doing it, you're always at the low end. It gets really kind of floppy and kind of unfocused. So we came up with a multi-band imager. So at this point, let's say I'll just kind of play back this project here. Make sure it's not too loud. And once I do this, I could say, let's say I make my low end really wide. You could hear it kind of gets a little unfocused. But if I want to tighten up the low end, but let's say I wanted to, and you could solo each band, you could adjust the frequency cutoff for each band, but I want to take my high mids and make those wider. I want to take the highs and make that wider without affecting kind of the low end information, making it a bit muddy. So I'll just kind of bypass this now. So, it sounded great before. It's a wonderful sounding track, but you just got to put this little touch on it.
Absolutely.
So a wonderful, just kind of get certain elements in the mix to pop out a little more, and kind of give it that polished sound, because there's a lot of people that spend, and, some of my friends that do like the best work, they spend a lot of time in that last 5% of the process mixing it, just to give them that edge.
I have learned the hard way that it's so important, that last 5%. It could change everything.
Yeah. And that's what could take like your track from being a demo to selling, multiple millions of copies.
Greg, this might be a dumb question, but what you're doing now, is it considered mixing or mastering or both?
You could use these in a mastering context, but you could do these on individual tracks. And that's kind of the beauty of Cubase.
Sure.
So the next plugin that was updated was one called Frequency, which is a very powerful EQ. So it is an 8-band linear phase EQ, and this has been in for a couple of versions, and it has some really slick functions. So if I'm here, we could just put on like the audition mode, and I could hear exactly what I'm changing as I move it, and then I could hear, so I'm hearing exactly what I'm EQing as I do this. If I know that this song is in a key of G, I could actually go to the frequency and just type in G4 and hit enter, and that will move the EQ to that particular frequency.
Oh, wow.
So let's say I wanted this on a piano where I'm going to have like 2 different mics. So I wanted to have the right channel have its own EQ and the left channel to have its own EQ. I wanted to maybe do it on a mid side. So I want to take this vocal and just bring out the vocal a little bit in the middle part of the panning spectrum. And what's on the edges, I just wanted to kind of do a roll off.
Wow.
Now what's been added is the ability of just having a dynamic mode. So if I wanted to just do dynamics on just my middle part of this EQ frequency that I've set up, I could just click on the mid, and now I could have just dynamics. So this gets to be kind of like a surgical type of EQ.
Right.
As we work with this. So you could really just kind of hone in on everything. And if you don't want to kind of toggle back and forth between the 2 modes, we could click here, and then you could select each band and be able to have those settings. So all of the settings can be accessed directly there.
Wow.
Now we have 8 bands. So we thought, sometimes the Steinberg developers are based in Germany and they could do crazy stuff. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting if someone wanted to have, 8 different side chainable inputs for each band? So if you're doing this on a master and you say, okay, I want the kick to trigger this frequency on this particular EQ, but I wanted the snare to trigger a different band. So 8 independent side chains within one single plugin.
That's insane.
Yeah.
What are we even talking about? That's insane.
Yeah. So just, I'm sure there's someone that, put it on a forum. It would be like, utopian world. We could do this. And someone at Steinberg's like, I can do that. I can make that happen.
I feel like if you're really into writing electronic music, you're going to put side chains on all 8.
Yeah. Side chains are really critical, and it makes
100%.
just like a huge part of production process for people.
For sure.
Now, one of the new plugins that was implemented was one called Squasher. And it's really kind of intended for, EDM and dance music, but it's really not limited to that. So we'll say, I have this kind of on 2 different elements of like the kick and snare of a track, as well as just the rest of the mix. So this is an up-down compressor. And this is kind of a very aggressive colored compressor by design. So we'll go ahead and just play a little bit here. So we'll just get a little bit of bearing, and I'll just put the kick on. So again, it's multi-band. So you hear how much more weight the kick has.
Oh yeah.
So you have, independent drive. You could have a mix. So if you want to do kind of parallel type settings. And let's say I want that synth to pop out. I'm just going to put this on the rest of the tracks besides the drums.
Oh, wow.
And this is like that last 5% plugin. Just kind of could put it on. And it's like, why doesn't my mix sound like someone else's production? And it's because they are running a plugin just like this.
Yeah, for sure.
Now you could spend 12 hours sculpting everything, or just throw the squasher on. So just on a kick,
Wow.
off, and on the rest of the mix.
That's amazing.
You know, so those types of plugins are just, you know, incredibly useful, and you just kind of can put it on and it solves problems in your mix and just, you know, makes it just work for you. And those are a lot of the great things that you could do, you know, with some of those functions.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can't stress enough taking the time. You know, don't ever think your track is done. Go to bed, sleep on it, come back, throw some more plugins on, and give it that little extra shimmer. That's amazing, Greg. Continue.
So the last new plugin we'll look at, and this one is a little different because it's not an actual kind of audio plugin, but it's something that's so critical. And it's under an analyzer section. It's called Supervision. And what this is going to allow us to do is to actually, we open it up and it's going to default to, it's like, oh, they made a VU meter. But it's actually kind of well beyond that. So let's say we're playing our track. So I could come over here. This is not only just a level meter, but there's 18 different meters here.
18?
18.
Oh my gosh.
So if I wanted to switch to like, okay, I want to see my loudness units. I want to see spectrum curve, spectrum bar. You know, I want to see phase scope. Now, what's really cool is you could just say, you know, I want to take, let's go say full screen, and I want to have my level meter here. I'll go to kind of full screen view. I could just say, okay, I could have 9 meters per instance. So I say I want a spectrum bar here at the bottom, and let's say I'll divide that, and I want this to be like a multi-panner. And I wanted this to be my phase scope. And as I come here, let's divide this a couple times. You know, I wanted this to now be panorama there. I wanted this to be like a spectrum.
What is happening?
Yeah. So, and, you know, now when you do your mix, you could just put these meters on and just capture it in video and just put it on YouTube without like, you know.
There's your music video.
Yeah, there's your music video. So if you're a musician, like, I don't want to do a video, just come over here and just kind of turn all these on. Because you could say, you know, I want this to be my spectrogram as well. And I'll go through just a couple kind of presets. This is one that I made of different configurations. You know, and if you want to see like your time display, even wave circles. So we have lots of people that are already kind of getting, you know, additional monitors just to run, you know, Supervision in full screen mode. So I have it just kind of, you know, on my meter. So I, you know, now my studio, you know, I'm waiting for Black Friday just to get a new deal on a monitor, and just gonna have a dedicated monitor just for all of the meters. You know, so it gives you like really interesting insights. And it just looks really cool, as most importantly.
It really does, Greg. I vow to you that the first thing I'm going to do in Cubase 11 is try to figure out what all those things are. Like the circle view, I don't know when I would look at that, but you know, and more professional people than me know. That is amazing. Well, all right. Again, I'm talking with Greg Ondo of Steinberg, the Cubase master that can write music faster, discussing brand new and world-renowned Cubase 11 digital audio workstation. Greg, I know you have a couple more things to get to, and I don't want to waste your time, but while I have you here, is there any plugins that you think are essential on that master track? Just regardless, you have to have X, Y, and Z if you're going to export a good sounding track. Because one of the problems I have is I feel like my music is always just a little quieter than everybody else's after export. Any tips?
I would put the maximizer plugin on.
Okay.
And there's a modern button on that, and that will kind of, you know, give you that edge. And the squasher plugin now, you know, and it's weird, you know, because the first time we did kind of we've been doing a lot of Zoom presentations for artists. And one of the guys, the first one we did was a jazz guy, like a really diehard jazz saxophonist. And I just put on a jazz track, and he's like, "Oh, that's so perfect." And I was like, "Yeah, it's really intended for EDM." He's like, "Oh, but it's so great on jazz," you know? So, you know, those are two great choices, and just little corrections, little tweaks with the frequency EQ, you know, and you'll
Sure.
be in great shape.
So, Greg, the piece I just released, Shaolin, that I recorded and mixed and mastered in Cubase, I just pulled it up. One of the plugins that I had on there was the Steinberg multiband compressor. Is that similar to Squasher?
Yeah, it's a similar, yeah, because that's, you know, able to define, you know, different frequency ranges and, you know, compress the lows differently than the mids and the highs. And so Squasher kind of does that, but Squasher could be a bit more aggressive.
Is it kind of like using compression as an EQ almost? Or is that a weird way to think about it?
That's a great way to think of it, you know, and
Okay.
it's just like, you know, I want to take these frequencies and just really focus on that, you know, because sometimes you may be wanting to kind of just sculpt kind of the cohesion, you know, into the final mix. And, you know, that, you know, and the multiband is great for that.
That's amazing. Well, I want you to definitely get to your next topic, because I think this might be the one that just blows people's minds. So here we go, viewers. You ready?
All right.
Take it
So
away.
let's say, you know, we talked about the composers living in the key editor, you know, they live and die in this, you know, it's like many composers now, when they do their videos, they just open up all the tracks and view it in a key editor and hit play and record. And that's kind of, you know, many people, this is our 21st century score view.
Right.
But, you know, the problem gets to be their assistants when they have to deliver multiple formats in multiple configurations. So the creative process is done. You know, we're all happy. We love how it sounds. And then it's like, oh, now I have to print out, you know, 12 different versions. I need one for Spotify. I need one for CD. I need a high resolution. I need stems. That gets to be the problem. So once we're here, we could go to our export audio and go to what we call, so just say we're going to do our export audio mixdown. We have this concept of job queues, because when we do this, you know, it's not untypical. You know, we had one of the people that we interviewed. He's like, yeah, when we were working on Dunkirk, Christopher Nolan wanted to hear the score. You know, we had to email him MP3 so he could listen to it in his car while he was driving.
Oh, wow.
You know, so stuff like that, you know, and so-and-so needed to burn a CD. So-and-so needed to do this. So let's say, okay, we need to make our MP3. So I'll say, let's come here. Let's make an MP3 file, and we add it to our job queue. Okay, now we need to make a WAV file that will be 44.1, 16-bit, and I want these to be interleaved. So that's our CD, and we could save each of these different scenarios as presets. And now the video editor needs a 48K stereo wave at 24-bit, and they need it to be split channels where the left and right are separate channels. I add that to the queue. We could also work with cycle markers. So if I have different songs all within one project, we could export different songs or different parts of the arrangement independently. When we also click on multiple, we thought, okay, when we're making stems, that we could say, one, you could have different naming conventions. So you could say, I want the name of the track, the name of the project, free text. So you could say, you know, we're going to do this made in Steinberg's Cubase, or, you know, put your name, put the BPM, whatever. So you could have different naming conventions. You could also send these to a project mixdown folder automatically, so that you don't have, like, you know, 10 different audio files named bass in your project. And it's like, which one is for which? I don't remember.
Right.
But here we could say, you know, so I need to send this off for someone else is going to mix it. So I'm going to send it dry. You know, so all of my tracks with all of, you know, my virtual instruments, everything's going to be rendered as equal length audio files. Let's add that to the queue. Now let's say I was doing like my mix and I have more reverb on the snare than I do the kick, and, you know, but they're all kind of being sent to different, you know, different levels. I could say, you know, we're going to include the groups and sends, so, but not the master effects, because someone else is going to be mastering it. So I want the reverb to be applied to the snare track so that it's rendered appropriately, and, you know, more to the snare and less to the kick, for instance. So I'll add that to the queue. Now let's say I'm a composer and I have a template and I have, like 3,000 tracks in my template, not unheard of. And then all of a sudden people are like, but you're only using, I remember once Hans Zimmer was like, yeah, my template, I'm only using 600 tracks of it. And I have all these empty tracks. What can I do? I was like, wow, it's tough. But so I made a quick project logical editor preset. And I said, select tracks only with events. Right. So now if that track was empty, because it doesn't do anyone any good ever to render an empty audio file, because the person receiving it's like, they screwed up. They gave me empty files. Something's wrong.
Of course. Right.
So now I could just click here to synchronize. And now I only see the tracks that have events on it. And I'll render only those. And let's add that to the queue. So at this point, we say, you know what? I want to have lunch. I'll get a cup of coffee. I say start queue export, and it'll go through and execute all of those different mix downs, automated so that you don't have to sit there and babysit the process. And, where this is like the most dreadful process, we just wanted to have the computer do what it does very easily with this.
Wow.
So one of the composers his comment was really interesting. He's like, this is how composers start, is they render files for other composers. Will we have a generation of new composers that won't be able to get work because they didn't start off rendering files for a more experienced composer? What are you doing to young composers? Like, we want them to have a vacation too and see their families and have a life. So instead of going through just painstakingly rendering files, this could all be done so fast.
Look at everybody casting shade on you all the time for making something easier. You're putting people out of work. It's too easy. Why would you include this?
Yeah. But the assistant's like, thank you. We're like, this is our assistant feature.
Right.
And we see the assistants just move on and do, phenomenal work.
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
industry, and it's the best like apprenticeship that you could ever have,
So Greg, my only question about that quickly is that I feel like some songwriters, music composers, they might wonder, like, why would you have tracks without events on them? That doesn't make sense. When I'm writing and I need an instrument, I drag it in. But is this a case of Hans Zimmer walking into his studio, or someone's already done it for him, where he opens his template and all 5,000 of his instruments are there and he just doesn't use all of them?
Yeah, exactly. Because for them searching for the sounds, if you're doing with, 1,000 tracks, and if you're searching for sounds, think how long that takes. So they massage, the composers will massage their templates, and their templates are their livelihood.
Right.
I think Danny Lux may have the most. He's a really well-known TV composer. He's done Grey's Anatomy for probably almost 20 years now. And he's around 4,000 tracks for his opening template. And, Junkie XL, one time I was at his studio, he was at 3,200 tracks. But, they're like, hey, the computer can handle it. Let's just load everything up and all my sounds are there. And I could try out different ideas. I can, if I play a part, I don't like it, I could drag it down to another part and see if it sounds better on that instrument without having to load up the instruments and kind of stop that creativity all the time.
I'm just warning those of you who are like me. If I had a template that big, it would take 2 days to open and I wouldn't be able to play. Like, Greg, I'm looking in your setup back here. You've got this beautiful rack unit. If that were all a giant computer, I could understand being able to have that many tracks, but there's no way.
The big rack is all, I don't think I actually have it on a separate power switch because I don't really turn it on.
It's a beautiful big rack.
Yeah. It's a great rack. And I got it from someone else who's like, okay, I'm not using that stuff anymore. Here, take my rack, Greg, and it's great. I got everything to fit. And it's great if I need to pull it up for kind of legacy projects, but obviously with Cubase and virtual instruments, it's just so convenient to do everything in the box.
Yeah. Audio hand-me-downs are the best. I say yes to everything and then figure out if I need it. I don't turn it away.
Yeah, exactly.
Always take it. So, Greg, I think we got a little out of order. Do you have time to go over the last topic or no?
Yeah, we'll do a one more thing type of topic.
Real quick, just because I did write one more joke and I want to make sure I have it. And of course, we're talking with Greg Ondo of Steinberg, the Cubase commander and sub-bass demander, talking about the brand new and incredible Cubase 11 digital audio workstation. I wrote it. I got to say it. All right, Greg,
Good. That's
what's,
good.
what's next?
All right. So one of the things that we've done at Steinberg is we've kind of started working and we did distribution for spectral layers. And this could be like a really pretty frightening type of tool, because what this is going to allow us to do is a lot of times, we look at audio waveforms and most of us are very, familiar with this concept. It's louder, it's taller, but let's say if we needed to do editing and I cut, it's actually going to edit all of the frequencies in my waveform view. So let's say I had a vocal. So I just recorded something and I had like a breath. So let's say someone records the most beautiful vocal and they just go right in the middle. You're like, why did you do that? Why did you do that? So I kind of mimic that. So this will be me talking with a breath. You may blow into the microphone accidentally. So what we want to do, if I edit it out, if I want to get the breath, that could be tricky. So what I'm going to do is just launch into Spectral Layers 1, which comes with Cubase. So this is kind of like a cut down version. And what we see is kind of, we look at the view and sometimes it could be a bit foreign looking, but we see the waveform. But what this is kind of your frequencies. And we see, very clearly, and if you studied, physics and music theory, you realize that these are the overtone series that we're seeing here.
Oh, no way. That's neat. Yeah. I didn't know that.
So that's the frequencies that we see. So what I want to do is, let's say I zoom in and this is kind of almost like taking the waveform and putting it on its side. So right here, we see a lot of activity. This is the breath. So I'm going to just use my mouse scroll wheel and we'll zoom in just to that particular area. So we'll zoom in and so say I just want to take this out. So we'll zoom vertically, and then I'm going to just roll this. So I'm going to just
are you trying to catch that really bright bit?
Yeah. So what I want to do, that's the breath, the low frequencies. That's where I went.
Okay.
So I'm going to put this into like an elliptical mode, and I'll just take this and select it. I'm just going to hit delete a couple times. And now without having to edit that part out, I've just removed the breath into the microphone accidentally. That seamlessly.
This seems like some FBI stuff. Like you shouldn't be able to do that.
This is, it's using a lot of forensic stuff. Now, where it gets very voodoo scary.
Yeah.
Is let's say I want to take this particular part and I'll run like a 2-track mix. So we see that this is a stereo file. I will just kind of navigate it down here. So we listen to just this file. So I have like, bass, guitar, drums, vocals. So consider this like the baked cake. It's like, cool. Someone made a cake. They spent a lot of time, put all the ingredients of the different parts in music. But I'm going to come over here in Spectral Layers 1 and say Unmix Vocals, and I'll hit OK. And it will just kind of,
I can only imagine what it's doing right now.
So we see kind of our progress indicator up top here.
I'm waiting with bated breath.
This is why it's the one more thing here.
Oh, man.
All right. So
I'm so
now
excited.
We see that when we look at this, I'm going to play. And we will just play back, and I'm going to take the vocals. So let's say I wanted to solo the vocals.
Get out of here, Greg.
And I want to mute the instruments, or just solo the instruments.
Oh my gosh.
So we can just isolate the vocals. So you want to do like a karaoke version of a song, it's pretty easy. And even if we have like our harmonies kind of laid out. I don't care about you anyway. No. I don't care about you. Now, this is where it gets even scarier. It's like I could just drag that vocal layer out to my project window. And now we have the vocals
get out of here
from the actual track, so we could play them all together.
Gosh.
So mute the backing track.
This is unreal. This is the one more thing. Oh my gosh.
So as you can see, if I was watching the live stream, I would make sure my name was, entered.
Absolutely.
For the prize.
For sure.
And these are just the new things, and this is all kind of during the pandemic that the Steinberg team has brought all of these new features.
Oh my gosh.
And they're all working from home, working really hard, to allow you to kind of realize your creativity.
You guys built like game-changing plugins in 7 months. What's going on over there at Steinberg?
I think in Germany they have really good coffee.
Oh, I bet. Greg, this is crazy. I can only once again say that that's not something that should be baked into software. That seems like a plugin that you would spend hundreds of dollars for. And I just remember when recording software was over $1,000 and it was really hard to use. You had to have a separate degree to do it. And now 3 clicks and you've isolated a track. And I love how you said it'd be good for karaoke. That's the.
I showed it to Eddie Riley last week, and they're all, and he, I showed it to him one day, and then he's like, "Okay, we have to do this whole thing again. I got 5 friends," and they're all like, "No way, we can't believe you could do that." But if we're making, with our cake analogy, we've now taken the eggs out and put them back in the shell.
Yeah, and they said it couldn't be done.
Yeah. So it's really scary voodoo stuff. And this is the light version of Spectral Layers. So when you get into like the bigger versions, it does even more. But you see how effective that is.
Yeah, Greg, I can't tell you how many times I've taken like a field recorder to record my friend's show. And I get it back and I'm just like, there's nothing I can do with this. It takes a whole team to make this sound good.
Yeah.
And within a few clicks, I can separate the band. Oh, that's just crazy.
It would be great if we had that amazing take. And, of course, the siren went by from the police car.
Right.
We can now take that out.
That's amazing. Well, Greg, I am going to announce some winners and just close a few things out. So I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy guy. I'm going to let you go. Greg, thank you so much for this invaluable tutorial on Cubase 11.
Thanks for having us. We love working with Sam Ash. I've been, going to Sam Ash stores for 28 years and, just love the vibe of them. So it's really wonderful to be involved with the little live streams that we've been doing. It's been so much fun.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. And as always, you're the best. And Greg, I'll talk to you soon, man.
Okay. Take care.
All right. Okay. Sam Ash viewers, are you ready to announce the amazing winner? I'm going to try to do this in the most dramatic fashion as I can possibly muster. Ben Ash behind the scenes, the wonderful Ben Ash. You know him, you love him. Has just messaged me that he has picked a winner. So I'm going to type congratulations and spell it correctly. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I'm typing your name, winner. Are you excited? Do you know that it's you? Can you feel it? That's not how you spell your name. Here we go. Almost there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the winner of Cubase 11, the newest, the latest, the greatest. Ben told me to do the drum roll like this. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Kidwell. Congratulations, Jeff. You are on your way to being as masterful at Cubase as none other than the amazing Greg Undo. So congratulations, Jeff. Good for you. So just want to remind everybody, Sam Ash is currently doing 0% interest for 48 months, 12, 24, 36, 48. That's 4 years. So if you've been eyeing that amazing piece of gear that you just love and it's there and it's just out of reach, perhaps that 4 years of 0% interest is finally what you need to get over that hurdle. Definitely take advantage of it. And there are some other amazing brands such as Yamaha that are offering certain items of different prices for 36 months. All of this can be found at samash.com, or you can call one of our experts at 1-800-4SAM-ASH. Definitely want to thank Greg. That was absolutely amazing. And in closing, I just want to say that we are living in a golden age of music production. Never has the competition been so vast, but so too has the barrier to entry never been so small. This is an industry where we always feel the need to beat our chests and feign a level of proficiency that we don't necessarily have. So let me be the voice of encouragement in saying that no matter where you are in your music production journey, Cubase 11 is the perfect tool for you. I launched a career on Cubase. I've known others that have done the same, and you can look up the roster of professional Cubase artists for yourself. Greg mentioned a ton of them, amazing names, people that I grew up idolizing, and I know you did too. This software can be used or as casually as professionally as you like. I pull it up when I want to practice piano or play around with a new incredible sounding VST. And consequently, some of those ideas get fleshed out and they get mixed and they get mastered and they get released on Spotify and other major streaming services. All of these things happen within the same program that is Cubase. It's a wonderful and amazing tool, and you should definitely take advantage of it. So again, no matter where you are in your music production journey, I encourage you to head over to samash.com or your local Samash if it's currently safe and feasible to do so. Please stay safe and pick up a copy of Cubase 11 for yourself. It's good enough for me. It's good enough for Hans Zimmer, and I know it'll be good enough for you. I want to thank Greg Ondo of Steinberg, the Cubase Jedi and all-around good guy. You knew I had one more in me, for joining us today and giving us an invaluable education on Cubase 11. Be sure to check out my track Shaolin, which was 100% mixed, mastered, and produced inside of Cubase. It's available now wherever you get your music, and be sure to head on over to Samash to secure your copy of Cubase 11. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm Dave Stutz, and we'll see you next time.